In the last few decades, the last 2 decades, the world has moved into the information age. People have been connected like never before. The march of technology, the penetration of the internet and social media have brought people together in radically networked societies. This is what our society looks like. It's networked, people come together, they can do things together, and they're so radically networked that they operate in an entirely different way than humankind has known before. In the previous industrial age, the society was organized along hierarchies. So the governments which exist today are organized in hierarchies. A hierarchy is a pyramid. So our society is a network, but our governments are almost always pyramids. When these two entities come together, there is tension, and there is a lot of dissatisfaction. It is not a coincidence that we've seen dissatisfaction around the world in the last 10 years. People have come out on the streets to protest, from places as different as the Arab Spring to New York City, where there's an Occupy movement. There are people protesting in Turkey, in Bangladesh, in Brazil, and even in our own country, where we had the unprecedented event of people walking in and protesting against corruption and later against the rape case which happened in Delhi. This sense of satisfaction comes not because the governments are autocracies, because the United States is not an autocracy, India is not an autocracy. It is not because of corruption, because the United States has lower levels of corruption than other countries do. It is structural. It is structural because you have a networked society which has a different set of expectations from governments, and governments, by virtue of their structure, because they are pyramidal, because they are hierarchical, are not able to satisfy the people. This causes a loss of legitimacy. People are unhappy with the government, people are dissatisfied with the government, and people think that the government is not legitimate. The government is the only entity that we know of that can solve social problems on a scale that is large enough. And if the government is not legitimate, if the government loses moral authority, this entire business of taking society, managing society, just doesn't happen. In fact, if the government loses moral authority, it can't enforce the rule of law. And without the rule of law, no society can function. So we need to change the structure of our governments from hierarchies to networks. But this is not easy. It's usually violent. Wherever it's happened, it's been bloody. It's like the throw of the dice. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you get consequences which you didn't expect. We call this a revolution. It's revolutions which have actually changed the structures of government. But a revolution is not something which we wish on ourselves or our friends. It might be romantic, it might appeal to our animal instincts, but revolutions are very bloody, very violent, very difficult processes for humankind, for societies to go through. But this is a problem only if you look at changing government from a top-down kind of a way. But look at it bottom-up. Let's look at it from the perspective of the governments we all are used to, but we don't really care. Most of you would know the name of the Prime Minister of the country or the Chief Minister of your state. You probably wouldn't know the name of the corporator or the municipal councillor who's really looking after your roads, your water supply, and your traffic. This is the level of government which is most important to us. It's the most neglected. And the good news is, this is the level of government where we can actually try to make change. Let's talk about this city. Around 2 years ago, we had this unprecedented, unfortunate, and deeply painful situation where a large number of residents skipped town in large numbers. I'm talking about the exodus of the Northeasterners from our city. It was shameful for Bangalore. And as a Bangalorean, I feel, even to this day, despaired, distressed, and ashamed that this had to happen in our city. But why did this happen? Events which took place 2,000 kilometers away, mischief, misinformation travels to our city, spreads like wildfire among a networked community. Messages move on SMS, on Twitter, on Facebook, through rumors, and through community gatherings. And before you know it, you have thousands of people queuing up in the railway station of Bangalore trying to get out of the city, queuing up for taking buses out of the city. The society could mobilize itself very fast, but the government just couldn't respond in time. This is not because the government was inefficient or the government didn't want to do it. In fact, that was a situation where you saw genuine concern among people in the Karnataka and the Bangalore city government. We wanted to prevent this, but they just couldn't. When they acted, it was too late. The government was seen as reactive. The government was seen as insensitive. The government was seen as having an ulterior motive in all this. But it was not really because of all this. It was because the government is a set of hierarchies. There was a police, there was a city government, there was a state government, and all of these were vertical hierarchies. So decisions had to be made from bottom up and top down. Information would flow from bottom and the decisions had to move down. But the people were not organized like this. People would make decisions based on what they heard from their peers. And because we had this kind of a situation, the government was just unable to manage this process. Now let's look at another more quotidian example and something which you just heard of a little while ago. Why are our roads so bad? Why is our traffic so bad? It's easy to say that it's corruption. It's easy to say these people are inefficient. It's easy to say that they don't want to do what they want to do, what they're supposed to do. But not many of us have actually looked at the underlying structure of what government is. One of my first jobs was to sit in a Singapore committee called the Road Opening Coordination Committee, because the government realized that there were about 16 to 20 government agencies responsible for the road. It's the same in Bangalore. You have the municipal engineers, you have the power supply guys, you have the water supply guys, you have the telecoms guys, you have people from the police, you have people from the traffic police, in some cases you have people from the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force. All of these government agencies are hierarchies, they report to their bosses, and they have to come together to fix your road, to maintain your road. This is extremely difficult for them to do. Why? Because while they may be coordinated at the top levels, the people on the ground, the officers on the ground, where the rubber meets the road, just don't even know who the other guy is, who's his counterpart in that other division, other department. It's no wonder that we have uncoordinated roads. It's no wonder that the road which is built today is dug up tomorrow. It's no wonder that the water guys dig a hole on this side of the road and the electricity guys have to dig another hole on the other side of the road just to get their services through. So our roads are not bad because they're poorly designed. The design is okay. Our roads are bad because they're not well maintained. And why are they not maintained? Not because of corruption, not because of venality. They're not maintained because the structure doesn't allow the people in government to coordinate, to come together and solve one public problem called roads. Now imagine if they're reconfigured in another way. Instead of being hierarchies, they are networks. So you have the same bunch of officials, the municipal engineers, the water supply guys, the telecoms guys, the police, the Indian Army, whoever, they're built into teams responsible for a particular public service, roads. Your job, this team's job, is to look after this sector of the road, this sector of the city. It's responsible to maintain the road in a particular way. It's responsible to keep the traffic flowing in a particular way. It's responsible to keep the lights on and everything there is to do with the road. Because as a citizen, I see a road. I don't care which department maintains the road. I don't care who's the authority which maintains the road and who has to do the permitting. I just care that I need to have a good road. And this is possible if we reorganize our city corporation, city governments into networks. We can have one network looking after roads, one network looking after public safety, one network looking after commercial enterprises, because getting a license to operate in the city is extremely complex. You probably need half a dozen licenses or more. But what if we had just one agency which gave you all the licenses that you needed to set up your business? What if we had just one network which collected all the kinds of taxes and dues that the corporation had to collect? It's good for the corporation because it's easier. You can generate more revenue. You can be more efficient in your collection of revenue. You have more resources to play with. It's good for the citizens because your corporation, your government is organized the way you are, the way we are, the way kind of services that we expect. But we don't see a network government today. We still see a hierarchical government today. Some people say, hey, wait a minute. The corporation and the government says we are understaffed, we are underfinanced, so why don't we throw more resources at the problem? Why don't we give them more people? Why don't we give them more money? Well, if you were to organize your government as a bigger hierarchy, it's not going to solve your problem. Because whatever money and additional resource which you put in will be undermined by the fact that you have a bigger hierarchy to deal with, more coordination to do. So more money and more people are not going to solve the problem. There are some others who say, hey, Bangalore has become too big. Let's cut this up into smaller municipalities. Let's have 3 or 5 different municipalities, and let's do that. That's a great idea. from a democratic point of view, because your political leaders are very closer to you, they're closer to you. But it's not going to solve the administrative problem because you have 5 hierarchies instead of 1. And the 5 hierarchies are still hierarchies and they still have to coordinate with each other. So there is no getting away from the fact that you need to restructure, break down the hierarchy and make them into networks. Now, it's not bad news. There's good news here. The good news is that you don't need any new legislation to make this happen. You don't need new bills to be passed by anybody. The state government and the city corporation can sit together, make an administrative decision, and say, hey, this is the way we are going to restructure our organization. Just like corporate restructuring. You just have a different way of structuring the organization. It's that easy. And here's even better news. You don't need to do it all at once. You can start with the roads, have a road cluster, make the roads well, make sure that this way of operation works, make sure that we all understand how this works, make sure we iron out the kinks, and we can do the rest. So you don't necessarily have to do drastic restructuring of the city corporation just because you want to fix your roads. You can try this. If it works, you do more. If it doesn't work, you tweak it and see what else you could do. Now, the city and the state government and the union government have to help this, but it is really in our hands. We can do this. People say, be the change you want to see. But before you want to be the change you want to see, you want to know the change you want to see. What is the ideal structure for Bangalore? What is the structure of governance that will give us the kind of services that we need? What is the kind of structure of government that will magnify, that will amplify, that will multiply the kind of energies that we people as citizens put in? We can't do this with the hierarchies. We have to do it with networks. What could you do? We participate in many civic activities. But what is that goal? What do we want our government to be? We have to consciously drive, in whatever field that we are in, we have to consciously drive our governments into the form that we want to see them. This is the only way we can get the kind of public services. This is the only way that we can get the living qualities that we expect. Let me take you back 200 years ago. The Industrial Revolution had just come in. The world had moved into an industrial age. And some countries built their governments around the philosophies, the structures, and the sciences and the knowledge of the information age. The United States, many countries in Western Europe, later Japan. These were the most successful economies, the most successful countries of the industrial age, because they were able to build their governments around the philosophy of that economic age they belonged to. We are now in an information age, and I would say that the governments which restructure themselves in tune with the requirements of the information age, networks, are the countries that will prosper in the future. Thank you.